Tracy Momi Reads. I am back again with another book review. Today, I am so excited to talk about the book Dear Edward by Ann Napolitano. I don't know why every time I've seen this lady's name, I thought it was like a I after the T, because I was about to say Ann Napolitano. And I always also, somebody else was saying the exact same thing. They always think about Neapolitan ice cream. But it looks like it is Ann Napolitano. Ann Napolitano, okay? I think sometimes I just make these authors' names harder than they have to be. I don't even know where I got this book recommendation from. Obviously, it was on a social, right? I was scrolling through Instagram more than likely, because I curate my homepage, right? I don't know if it's called a For You page on Instagram like it is on TikTok, but you know the page when you click on the magnifying glass, and usually it's like, you know, the algorithm kind of populates it with like stuff that you've liked or pages that you've visited or things like that. Well, I always make sure to go through there and just like all the book stuff. So that's all that shows up on mine is book stuff. So, you know, I'm able to get, you know, recs. I'm able to see cool reels and you know, different things like that, and follow people that I may not have known about prior to that. And I'm pretty sure this was, I don't know the person's name or can't remember, because I do a lot of screenshots as well. And I remember seeing this and how the person was going on and on about it. Then I went, because this is what I do, I went to Amazon just to read more of the blurb, did my little screenshot, and the book was on sale. I don't know how much I paid for this book, but did I get this from Amazon or did I get this from Thrift Books? All I know is this is a hardcover book. The USA price says $29. I didn't pay $29 for this book because I don't pay $29 for books. If I don't get it from Kindle Unlimited or the library book of the month, I go to Thrift Books. Like under $20 every time for hardback books. You know, I've gotten them for like, I've gotten them for like $5.99 at Ollie's. So it's just not, you know, I have paid. Let me back up, because I have to get Tia Williams books when they come out. So I have paid the premium price for a couple of her books. But you know, in this economy, you got to do what you got to do. So anyway, back to the book, Dear Edward. After reading this book, I'm going to have to go on a deep dive of her stories. There's one that's really popular. I can't think of the name of it right now, by her. And I read the blurb, and I just don't know if it was something I would vibe with. But I know she has other books, so I'm going to have to check out her catalog, because I really like her writing style in this particular book. So the first thing on here says, what does it mean not just to survive, but to truly live? Okay. So the gist of this book, a 12-year-old boy gets on an airplane with his family, his older brother, his mom, his dad, and they are moving cross country. They live in New York. Their mom got a job. They're moving to LA because she's a writer. She writes screenplays and TV shows and stuff like that. And basically the plane crashes, and there are 100, I want to say, was it 191 people? Oh, it says, well, it's him, his brother, mother, father, plus 183 passengers. So that's 187. So 187 people total on the plane. He is the only person that survived. And you know, and I was reading like some of the, which I normally don't even do, but the acknowledgments from the author, and she said that there were 2 actual plane crashes that inspired this novel. The first was the 2010 crash Fuquia Airways Flight 771. I'm so sorry, I definitely messed that up. Which had only one survivor, a 9-year-old Dutch boy. Okay, and then she said there was the second one was a crash Air France Flight 447, and she got like a lot of the technical stuff from there because somebody had did an article on it. But yeah, so Edward, the 12-year-old boy, only person that survived. And was so interesting to me about this book is like the before and after, right? Before the crash, he was known as Eddie. He was a little kid, 12 years old, and he became Edward after the crash because he instantly, his life obviously was changed, but you instantly have to grow up. You've lost your childhood best friend and your brother. You've lost your parents. And his mother had a sister, and her and her husband, they took custody of him essentially. And so he grew up with them. And at first I was like, okay, I don't know what I was expecting. First of all, I have to pull back because it's like every author, every writer, they tell the story the way that they feel, see fit, and it's their characters. But I had to think about it, because I was thinking, there's no way, you lost your mom, your dad, you on a plane, all these dead people. But I think he was unconscious when they pulled him from the rubble, according to the book. But he just didn't seem emotional enough for me. I was like, oh, I'd be a mess and this and that. But not only does everyone grieve differently, but I think there was a part of him that thought maybe he was dreaming. He didn't have a reaction because this is not real. No, I'm on my way to California with my family. What do you mean they're dead and I'm the only person that survived, and we got stuff to do tomorrow. We're going to go do this thing. We're supposed to be going, to the beach, or we're supposed to be, so as the story unfolds, I think he's still on that plane, right? He thinks he's still on that plane mentally. So everything else is just moving on around him, right? He's in the hospital, and they move him to another hospital. Then he goes home with his aunt and uncle, but he still has yet to have a major breakdown or anything. It's just this is all fake, right? This is a simulation. And there was a girl that lived across the street from his aunt. Her name was Shay. And they were the same age. And I think with kids, not only is there this resiliency, right? Because if you ask the average person, I'm 55. I cannot remember specific things from when I was 12. Now, had I had some traumatic instance happen when I was 12, I'm sure I remember it, but the details of it. I think the most traumatic thing that happened to me before I was a full-fledged adult, my grandmother passed away. And at the time, I think I had turned 17. I remember my mom coming to pick me up from school. I remember us going to my sister's school. I remember vague things that happened at the cemetery. I don't remember a single thing, and I was really close to my maternal grandmother. I do not remember a single solitary thing about her funeral. Not a thing. And I was 17 at the time, right? And that was a defining moment of my life. I remember being very, grieving and crying, and a few things that were maybe said, very, flutters. Nothing about the funeral. Don't know if that's just because my memory doesn't retain that, or because I've been to so many other funerals since then, or I blocked it out, or I don't know. I have no idea. But when I was going through, reading this book, I just thought about, because let me bring it back, because Sashay, the girl that lives across the street, they were the same age, but she hadn't lost anybody. Like, well, her dad wasn't around, but as far as she knew, he wasn't dead. He just left her and her mom. But she did not treat him any different. It's like, oh, it sucks that your family's dead, but okay, I got somewhere to go. I'm supposed to be meeting my friends, or I'm going to camp, or why are you so weird? Like, she didn't treat him any different. And it was because, number one, she couldn't relate, and number two, I think when you're a kid, there are times in your life, especially when you get to those teenage years, where you think that time is going to be forever, and there's things that happen that you just can't get over. Then there's other things you're like, okay, moving on to the next. It's just really weird, the psyche of kids going into that, teenage stuff or whatever, because they become very good friends, and there are, some other things that happen that she's obviously has the capacity, but she's a very odd bird. But I think he latched on to her because everybody, which rightfully so, I mean, they were, treating him like very delicate and very like he was fragile, because again, he hadn't shown any like, oh my God, or my mom, or script. He didn't do any of that. So I don't know if they were like just on the precipice waiting for it to happen, or they thought maybe something had snapped in his head. He was never going to be right again. But she just was just like, okay. And he started this weird thing. Like, he wouldn't talk to his aunt and uncle. Everything was fine. Every time they asked him anything, fine. He couldn't eat for a while. Like, food just didn't have a taste, and I guess probably because he didn't think any of it was real. Why am I going to eat this fake food? But he started losing weight, and there was this whole thing. But one night, he just walked across the street. We're talking like after everybody in the house, his aunt and uncle had went to bed. He just walks across the street and knocks on the door, and Shay's mom comes, and she's like, what are you doing here? Like, it's past bedtime. And I can't remember exactly what he said to her or what she said to him. And she was very compassionate. I think she knew, like, this boy is broken beyond repair. What do you need? You want to sit on our porch? You want me to go get my daughter? And she let him in. And he started this thing for like a year or two or more. It may have been more, because at one point they were like, okay, y'all getting too old for this. We got to cut this out. He would go just sleep in the chair on the floor in Shay's room because he wanted to be near her. Somebody that, I guess, treated him normal, and somebody that didn't know him before. So even though she couldn't really relate to what he lost, I think something about that must have been healing for him, because I don't know, she didn't know what he lost, so she had no reason to treat him any different than, that she would treat anybody else, essentially. But it just, the whole thing about grief and how, I mean, I just can't even imagine. And of course, a lot of people thought because he was the only person that survived, he was like the second coming of Christ, or he was anointed in some way, and they wanted to touch him, or they wanted to pray with him. They wanted to, have him say words over their lives, just random stuff that people were coming out of woodworks to expect from this kid who had just lost his entire world, as well as surviving a catastrophic, accident. But the thing that I really thought was cool about the book and the way that the author wrote the book. So the first chapter, it's a scene in an airport. They're going through security, and his brother is being a little asshole, doesn't want to go through the metal detectors, and acting all crazy. Then they get on the plane, and then there's this observation, of other people that are on the plane, and then we get kind of inside of their heads. Like there was a guy in the military. He was on his way to see his grandmother, so we heard his thoughts and how he got on the plane and where he came from, and something that had happened to him. There was another girl, a young girl who we got her backstory. So we got little, not all 183 passengers obviously, but there was a handful of people that we got to learn who they were. And the thing that was a common thread between all of these people, they all had plans. The stuff that they were going to do when they got off the plane, stuff they were going to do tomorrow, and none of them had reason to think that they weren't going to make it to their destination. And that just shows you the fragility of life, because plane crashes actually are less common than car crashes. And I think more people get on planes thinking they're going to like crash or fall out of the sky than when they get in a car. I don't think anybody thinks when they get in a car that they could be in an accident before they get to the stop sign. And that happens more often than plane crashes. But, then we jump to like after the first chapter, then the second chapter, the plane had already crashed. I guess because they had already told us in the blurb that it was going to happen. It was like recovery efforts. Then in the next chapter, we're back on the plane, and it kind of just builds up to when the pilots realized there were problems. And as the plane, as those chapters are inching towards what we know is going to be total devastation, the present day chapters are showing how Edward is thriving and surviving, and in some instances healing as the years pass, right? So I thought that was a really interesting approach to the story, especially since there is a part where he says that he thinks there's a part of him that is still in the sky. He eventually said that. And, they got him therapy, and he ended up going to school. Him and Shay went to the same school, and it takes us through his graduation and what happens after, they graduate high school and that type of thing. But it's not until, I want to say maybe 9th grade, maybe, or 10th grade, he's in high school, when he really starts to kind of deal with what happened. So we're talking like 4 or 5 years past that. They find these letters that his uncle, he wasn't really trying to hide them from him, but he just didn't know where his mental was. Like, we don't know. Something might set this kid off. And people that were on the plane, like their relatives, and it's mainly the people that we have been, gotten glimpses of, had written him, and they were telling him stuff like, my son Sam was on the plane, and he had, he was going to go fishing in Alaska, before he died. So I really wish you'd be able to go fishing for him, since he wasn't able to do it. It was like letters like that. And he kind of, some of them he like took to heart. It was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do some of this stuff for these people that aren't able to do it. And I think that kind of made him have a sense of purpose, because he also, the survivor's guilt was very heavy. It's like, why was I chosen? I can't even do anything. I'm a dumb kid. Like, why wouldn't they, like, it was a doctor on the plane. There was a man with a lot of money. Like, why me? So he felt like, he wanted to start doing some of that stuff. There was a lady who had lived multiple lives on the plane, and I think she knew something was going to happen. But it was just such a heartwarming story, such a palate cleanser from a lot of the books that I do read. Ironically, there was death in here, but it wasn't anything to solve. We learned what happened and why it happened and how unfortunate it was, but it wasn't like a mystery or suspense. It's just really the coming of age of this boy who, it's hard enough, growing up and going through, what you go through as far as becoming a teenager and into manhood, but you had all this baggage, and stuff that happened to you that you have to contend with as well. So I want to say maybe once in the story, I think that he actually started, like, he cried, but everything was so internal, which that is kind of scary because that could be a villain origin story, if you don't get some of the stuff out. But I think those letters like helped him live and helped him realize you're on the ground. You're not still in that plane. And it was kind of a culmination, I think, that a few chapters past that is when we get the past chapter of, the plane crashing. So it was like a literal collision of his former and past self that maybe allowed him to, to move on with his life, which, obviously would never be the same. But yeah, very, very well written. It's not as sad as you would think, right? I mean, the whole time you're just like, oh my God. I mean, your heart, it was very heartfelt, very heartfelt. But since it was more an exploration, I think, into how we move past grief, I think in that sense, because he was very fortunate that he had family, had people who loved him and who wanted him, and that decided to take care of him. And one small thing, it may be a slight spoiler, but just to make the give it some context, his aunt didn't have any children. She couldn't have kids. She had been trying. She and her husband had been trying, and several miscarriages, and they had just decided that maybe it wasn't for them. And then they become the parent of a 12-year-old, her nephew. So the way that life works is pretty crazy. So yeah, anyway, I could go on and on. I really enjoyed this one. And it's this cover with the birds. I can't remember what kind of birds those are, but those are birds that you see there on the cover. At the crash site, an artist did an installation, like they, got, how like you could protect the area or land so nobody can build there or whatever. It was a patch of the land where they had found some of the debris, and everything. He built a sculpture, a statue, and he had 182 birds, like they were flying towards the sky from the way they, described it in the book. And it was for one bird for each one of the passengers that passed away. So that's what the cover represents. But very good. So if your heart can take it, and you're looking for a very satisfying ending, I think you really enjoy Dear Edward if these type of books are your jam. So if you have read Dear Edward, I would love to know your thoughts. What did you think about the way he processed his grief? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video, and if you have not already subscribed to my channel, go ahead and take the opportunity to do so now. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.